So American voters have again rejected a female president to take over at the White House. This as U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris lost to Donald Trump in what some thought was a closely fought election. Harris's defeat has raised questions about female presidential candidates in the U.S. Well, joining us is Dr. Lubna Nadvi, who is a political science, international relations, conflict transformation and peace studies expert at UKZN. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Nadvi. It's interesting because in the run-up to this election in the U.S. this week, the polls were saying it's going to be a close race. The experts were saying it wasn't going to be a close race. It really wasn't. I mean, were you expecting that the victory for Trump would be this big?
Well, I think that many people were really taken by surprise at the amount of support, the level of support that Trump received. But I think one has to go deeper than just simply, looking at gender of the candidates or what have you, to understand why it is that Trump received the amount of votes that he did. It wasn't necessarily because Americans love him more than they, like Kamala Harris. I mean, there were certainly a lot of other factors that played a role. I think, though, that I was actually quite surprised that someone of the nature of Donald Trump, who's, been a candidate that has really, been a challenge for the American political system, was actually elected. But of course, remember, there's the electoral college system that plays a role in electing presidential candidates. There's also the kind of demographics of the voting public. So you have to look at multiple factors. And although Kamala Harris was somebody who, as female and a woman of color, was seen as popular in some spaces, she was also the vice president of the current administration, and an administration that had become very unpopular for a number of reasons. And so assuming that she would be elected simply because she was a woman and a woman of color is not necessarily the way that we should be looking at it. We have to unpack it further.
Yeah, and 100%, because there is the policy direction that has been taken by the Democrats administration over the years that, as you say, and I even note your scarf, for instance, right? And I think about what the U.S. did with the war on Gaza, and certainly that playing a big role. But the gender issue is at the heart of it, very much a big issue. And I'm not just talking about them voting for a woman president, but certainly a woman who spoke a lot about protecting the autonomy of women in the U.S., a very important talking point for a lot of people around this issue of abortion, right? Banned in some states of the United States of America. What is it going to take, in your view, for the American citizen to consider a female a leader? What would that take? And is that, and as you say, the gender perhaps not important, or perhaps the discussion we should not be having? Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying that Americans will vote for a candidate whose message resonates with them. And for example, if you look at, Harris's message around many things, yes, she spoke about, women's rights to sort of be in charge and in control of their bodies. And that is something that resonates with the, broad sort of American electorate, women in particular. The fact that Roe versus Wade was, overturned, and there were all of these issues that came up, certainly. So I think that America is not opposed to a woman candidate or a woman of color. It is really because of the positions that Harris took, and certainly Biden and Harris together in this administration. She was seen as a candidate who was supporting the ongoing genocide in Gaza. And if you speak to voters from the Arab American community or the Muslim American community, or voters of color, they would say to you that they either voted for Trump as a protest vote, or they gave their vote to another candidate from the Green Party, that was Jill Stein, and she became an option for many other, voters who basically felt that they couldn't give their vote to Harris because uh, under the Biden-Harris administration, the cost of living had increased. People could not afford many basics, and that message was not something that the Harris campaign was really speaking to. And I think that people thought that Trump could maybe resolve that issue. So the economy played a huge role. But in some ways, it was also a protest vote. They didn't want to vote for a candidate who supported genocide
Yeah.
or supported war or violence or, anything along those lines.
It's interesting. So that's an interesting point. I just want to look at some of the data here, right? And we go back to where we have had a woman run for the Oval Office, and you've got in 2016 Hillary Clinton. She received nearly 3 million more votes than her counterpart, her Republican counterpart, and still lost the election. Perhaps that being, a sign that there is some interest in having a female president. The policy really important. What are the lessons that then should have been learned by the Democrats and perhaps even the Republicans from the 2016 race of Hillary Clinton?
Well, in the American elections, you can win the popular vote, but you could lose the elections because of the electoral college system and how it is that each state is allocated so many votes, and you have electors that then elect the presidential candidate. So it's a complicated system. But I think the lessons that should have been learned is the fact that the two main parties, the Republican and the Democratic Party, have to listen to the voices of their citizens. And there was a sense that, the party matters more than the people. And I think that the people really, in the way that they voted this time round, played, really gave a very loud message that neither the Democratic Party nor the Republican Party is really listening to us, even though the Republican Party got more votes. So I think that the lessons to be learned is that you have to listen to the citizenry, and that the candidates need to speak to the issues that matter to them. In sort of the heartland of America, traditional parents wanted basically a candidate that, they feel they could trust. Now, Donald Trump is not somebody necessarily that you can, say is your ideal male role model, but it's possible that he was seen as somebody who had a more traditional message, whereas with the Democratic Party, they were going with the kind of more liberal message, which might not have appealed to some of those more conservative voters. So you have to look at the demographics of the voter population. But certainly, I think that it's very clear that the economy had a very important role to play, and the way in which that the American public have had to deal with the high cost of living. And effectively, they said, well, they don't want another 4 years of Biden and Harris because they would have to deal with the same issues. They'd rather go for someone different, and that's what they did.
Yeah, very interesting. And I'd say, where transformation is concerned, it certainly has been quite the ride for South Africa to watch, right? To see a woman run for the Oval Office. So we're going to leave it there. Doctor, thank you so much for your time. We do appreciate it. Dr. Lubna Nadvi there, who is with Political Science, International Relations, Conflict Transformation and Peace Studies at UKZN.